Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for this episode of the Campus Safety Voices podcast. I'm Amy Rock, Campus Safety Senior Editor. Hazing is a significant issue in both K-12 schools and higher education. One study estimates 47% of students go to college already having been hazed, and 55% of college students involved in clubs, teams, and organizations experience hazing as well. I had the chance to speak with Holly Ryder, VP of Impact at Vector Solutions, about the current state of hazing on college campuses. We also spoke about the psychological effects of hazing, how the pandemic impacted hazing, and how colleges are working to mitigate hazing. Here is our discussion. Be sure to subscribe to Campus Safety's YouTube channel and like or leave a comment on our videos, or subscribe to our Campus Safety Voices podcast on Apple and Spotify and leave a review. So we cover hazing on campus safety, and while it does happen on K-12 campuses too, we're obviously going to focus today's conversation on its impact on college campuses. And Holly, as a VP of Impact, at Vector Solutions, which is an education and training platform for higher education, can you talk to me about the current state of hazing on college campuses, where it's happening most? Is it improving, getting worse?
Oh, such great questions. So we have a really unique insight into this issue because we work with 2,100 campuses, 9 million learners use our digital education courses and our tech every year. And so as we're looking at the scope of hazing in higher education, I'd say the first thing that I would want for learners and listeners to know is that, we focus oftentimes when we're thinking about hazing on some specific groups. So nationally affiliated organizations, potentially, or athletic organizations. But the truth is that hazing can and does occur in all social organizations in higher education. So we're talking certainly about, your bands, your intramural sports, your other kinds of, honor societies, interest-based groups. And so if we're only focusing on those groups that may have the most publicity around hazing, we're going to be missing a lot. And the truth of the matter, Amy, is that we actually don't have as much information as we should about the way in which hazing is impacting our campus communities because there is not enough data on this issue. But what we know from the data that has been gathered is that it is endemic. It is a part of any organization that has social hierarchies involved, and that there is an opportunity to prevent the harms of hazing if we decide to invest in that way.
Now, I don't know the exact definition of hazing, but I feel like I went to college, and I feel like hazing to some extent happens just in party settings too, like the pressure to drink if you're like friends with upperclassmen or things like that. There's just a lot of pressure in college, as is even just if you're not trying to become part of a group. It's just finding friends and people I feel like are peer pressured, which I think is extremely similar to hazing. So
yeah, I want to pull out a couple of things from what you just shared. So, hazing really is any activity that is expected of someone who is going to be joining or participating in a group. So what you just talked about, some of that sort of social expectations around behavior. Some key differentiators are that it's about humiliating, degrading, abusing, or endangering someone, regardless of a person's willingness to participate. So something that is really challenging for hazing prevention is that some individuals will say that they had positive benefits from hazing. That does not mean that hazing is okay, or there aren't negative consequences, or that doesn't create conditions that will potentially lead to greater harms. And it also means that we need to focus on a range of hazing behaviors. So sometimes when we're thinking about hazing, we really focus on the most severe, the most significant, the truly life-threatening hazing behaviors. Absolutely, we need to be doing everything that we can to address those issues. And also, those kinds of life-threatening hazing behaviors are a culmination of a cascade of hazing behaviors. So we need to think about those lower level behaviors as well that might, for lots of folks, be considered as, a normative part of the campus experience, maybe even a fun part of the campus experience, something that they may well have participated in, engaging in, as well as being the receiver of. So thinking about both a range of behaviors, thinking about making sure that you're focusing not just on the most harmful behaviors, but also on the lower level behaviors that embarrass, behaviors that may really seek to set a person out from a group and seek to create conditions where if they don't agree to the behavior, they're not going to be able to be a part of that social network, which is, I think to your point, as you were noting, what students deeply want is to feel connected.
And now I know, obviously, we said incidents of that make the news are deaths, and those are just far, far too common still. But what are some psychological effects college students are experiencing from hazing?
Oh, I want to contextualize this question actually within the context of this moment that we're in now, this post-COVID environment. So overall, what the research tells us is that, hazing behaviors and persons who experience hazing, that, some of them will say that they experienced no negative consequences. But up to 40% of them will say that they have significant negative consequences. So, feelings of isolation, feelings of being degraded, feelings of being humiliated. They may well experience negative academic consequences because of the hazing behaviors that they are enduring in order to be a part of a group. Sleeplessness, weight loss, all of these things can be a negative consequence of hazing. And then also just, when you're placed in a position where your ability to belong is contingent upon enacting a set of behaviors that you may not desire to do or that might feel wrong to you, has itself its own negative consequences. And and that can carry through for a long time for students.
Absolutely. Now we had said, talking about the pandemic, and I'd imagine during the pandemic with many students home for quite some time, that once they return to campus, hazing may have gotten a lot worse at some schools since kids are just craving socialization. Did the pandemic impact hazing on college campuses, whether good or bad?
The jury is still out, but so many of my colleagues who are working in the mental health environment, who are working in, student affairs, student conduct, we are seeing a rise in maladaptive or harmful behaviors, or, simply a rise in behaviors that spring from a context of lack of confidence in one's social skills. So this has a constellation of impacts when it comes to hazing. So we can think, for example, of, just as you noted, like this craving to socialize, for college students. And, I know my colleagues who are working on college campuses are probably nodding their heads at this, that desire to belong really is existential. Students are willing to make choices that could endanger their lives in order to belong, to feel like they have a place on campus. And in a context where there has been that, deficit of socialization, deficit of ability to build those social skills in the high school environment before arriving in what can be a higher stakes college environment, that has those negative repercussions. So while we don't know precisely what the impact is of the COVID experience in this post-COVID environment, what we do know is that, the way in which students' mental well-being has been impacted, the way in which their socialization has been impacted, the way in which their ability to, have confidence in connecting with each other has been impacted. All of that is likely to create conditions that make it ripe that hazing is likely to occur.
A couple months ago, I spoke to someone in student affairs at a college who said, a lot of the incoming freshmen, they missed out on some of the independence of their junior and senior year in high school. So like when I was a junior in high school, I got my license and then I was able to like drive to my friend's house. But like with people in quarantine or, just trying to be safe, kids were stuck at home more often than they normally would be. And just like having less of those independent experiences. And then they go to college and they're essentially like 16, not literally, but in their experience, things that they've experienced, and it's 18 is already so young to be living on your own, and then you add that on top of it. So it's interesting to hear more about that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Sure. Okay. And I think people think of hazing, they likely think of fraternities or sports. Are there other campus groups where hazing seems to be occurring often?
I think we would potentially get it wrong if we focused in on any specific group, because that is going to really target training, where what I will hope that we will do is really take a public health approach that really seeks to train all students on hazing prevention and train all faculty and staff who are interacting with those student groups on hazing prevention. So, again, thinking about, do you have social organizations or student organizations on campus? Most institutions can say yes. Do those student organizations or social organizations have hierarchies? Answer, yes. So we really need to be training all of them on how to notice situations of potential hazing, how to intervene early, and how to create different kinds of ways to welcome in new members and to create feelings of belonging, feelings of tradition, feelings of pride. One of the things that we know about effective hazing prevention, which I hope all students will receive, is that you really can't just say, don't do hazing. You have to replace it with something that's going to be equally meaningful for students, and there's going to achieve the outcomes that hazing is intended to create, but falls so woefully short of. And so, the way in which we build those skills for creating those cultures of respect within student organizations, the way in which we create means by which there is belonging on campus. And again, building those skills for noticing when potential hazing behaviors are being planned or being executed, learning how to intervene in those. And then, if a situation of hazing does occur, building confidence that if students report, that action will be taken and that individuals' in personal experiences and identities will be respected is really important.
Yeah, you think of it, if you have a roommate who is on a sporting team or joining a fraternity or some sort of student organization, and you're seeing them be negatively impacted, being able to recognize those signs is so important. So are more and more colleges requiring this training or offering it to all students? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things that we do follow here at Vector Solutions is the legislative trends nationally. And we have seen a number of states put in place mandatory training responsibilities for institutions of higher education. And that is, really a great first step, but, definitely laws alone are not enough. I have seen an increase in the desire to deliver hazing prevention to all students, again, taking that public health approach, making sure that any student who is eligible to be a part of a student organization is getting that skills and training to prepare them to be a part of an organization in a way that is healthy and respectful. But the other thing is that there are other training requirements that incoming first-year students are required to be provided by institutions. So, for example, there's sexual assault prevention training. We provide sexual assault prevention training from Vector Solutions to thousands of college campuses every year. And there's an overlap between sexual assault prevention and hazing prevention. Really, those skills related to consent. What is consent? What is coerced consent? And is that valid? Answer, of course, no, it's not valid. But, in terms of hazing prevention, we want to deliver specific training around hazing prevention and reinforce it across all of the areas which hazing impacts, which is mental well-being, again, sexual assault prevention, alcohol misuse prevention, diversity and inclusion. All of these are areas that are also impacted by hazing. And so we can have a duplicating or reinforcing messaging across each of these areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some other ways colleges are working to stop hazing in student organizations, and is it working?
The is it working is a great question. So let me start at the beginning. Okay. And I love the is it working question, because that leads to a place where I think we as colleagues working in higher education can do a better job. So what is an effective approach? So I've mentioned a few times a public health approach as it relates to individual level training. But that public health approach really needs to have an institutional foundation. So it is I think unfair to only situate the responsibilities for hazing prevention on individual students or student groups. There really needs to be a reinforcing infrastructure within the college or university itself to help prevent hazing. So what does that look like? Well, first of all, it looks like an investment in training for all persons who are involved with student organizations. So making sure that those coaches, that those student organization advisors, that faculty really have the skills to recognize potential situations where hazing can be being planned or being enacted, to know how to report it, and really to know how to prevent it. So making sure that those caring adults around students who are a part of building those cultures within organizations know what their responsibilities are and have the skills to be able to execute them. Then we want to make sure that we are also gathering data about the experiences of students, so that we're building our hazing prevention strategies around information that is really institution specific, and making it a whole campus approach. So hazing prevention should not just sit with the dean of students. It should not just sit with the campus safety officials. It should not just sit with, for example, potentially fraternity and sorority life. It really needs to be a whole campus approach, because each member of that campus is going to bring us unique vision and a unique set of information to the table to really help create that comprehensive hazing prevention strategy. So institutions that are bringing a comprehensive hazing prevention strategy that is using data to reinforce their efforts, that are doing 360 training, not only of students, but also of faculty and staff, that are measuring that training for effectiveness. Those are the institutions that are most likely to see reductions in hazing. And the last piece is that they also need to not only seek to reduce hazing behaviors, but increase opportunities for belonging, right? So that students can feel as though they are a part of the campus, they are a part of the institution, they have a place where they belong, is really, really important as well. So as we're preventing hazing behaviors, we also want to be increasing opportunities for belonging across the institution.
And now, social media can be great in a lot of ways, but I'd imagine when it comes to hazing, it can perpetuate it. How has social media like RushTok created another level of hazing, and how should campuses work to create guidelines for student groups? And also, sorry to add on to that, but maybe a little context for RushTok, which would help a lot of people, since I barely know about it myself, but it's like this huge phenomenon apparently.
Yeah, so RushTok is a new social media platform that has popped up that is, really similar to TikTok. So it's very video driven, short video driven, but it's focusing on the the process of fraternity and sorority members welcoming new members into their organization. And, it's just the most recent of many. Yik Yak certainly has been and is, again, I understand, also important social media platform. But, really, regardless of the platform, these platforms we've mentioned, they're going to pop up, they're going to go away. But the consistent thread is that social media is absolutely, a part of the student experience on college and university campuses now. And it doesn't make sense for us to, try to ban it. But what we can do is really try to, again, to your point, set guidelines for the ways in which student organizations are using social media. And the cool thing is that when you set realistic guidelines that are built in collaboration with student organizations, those are going to be, guidelines and social media digital citizenship skills that are going to actually also translate to the work environment as well. So what do we mean by this? We, of course, are always wanting to always share materials and information with an individual's consent. It is, certainly against ethical values and also oftentimes against the law to share information or materials, especially materials that are intimate in nature, without a person's consent, or to pass those along even if they were given to you with your consent. So definitely that's one of them. But then also really looking to respect the dignity of all persons when you're posting social media materials, making it positive, making it really focused on the values and the goals of the organization, and really ensuring that if any information on any social media platform were shared with a potential employer going forward, that you would feel proud of what you had shared on that social media platform. I mean, these kinds of guidelines are really helpful for student organizations. And the other thing is that I know lots of campus-based professionals who are, to the extent possible, really tuned in and monitoring those social media channels. So step one, really create those guidelines with the collaboration of students so that everybody has buy-in. Step two, monitor and, to the extent possible, hold accountable when student organizations are failing to meet the expectations or the guidelines that they have set for themselves with your collaboration. And those two pieces together help us get to a better environment where we're having more conversations about this, where there is an expectation that their behavior on social media is being reviewed and is available, as all social media is what I like to see, and where I think is kind of the best practice approach.
Those RushTok videos make me laugh, but on the upside, I guess I find myself thinking, oh, it's kind of nice that they're like getting together and doing like a choreographed dance, which is like focusing on time together and collaboration. And so I guess it channeling their time and resources into kind of a fun thing, versus when people think of, sororities or fraternities, they think of them just like, partying. And so it's kind of nice, I guess, for them to come together and do something that's, not nefarious.
I like that you give that example, Amy, because, what you pointed out is that that there is an opportunity to create positive means to create inclusion and belonging. Now, one thing I'll say is, let's ask ourselves a question: is the choreographed dance only for, incoming members? Is that choreographed dance something that incoming members are required to do? And if they don't, or don't do a good job at, or is there humiliation involved? So this is a really great example where it could be, are all members participating? Are there leadership members of the organization who are also a part of the group? Great questions to ask, because this is something that could be a really healthy, respectful, fun, engaging, means to create team building, to create belonging, to create a sense of pride, to create tradition. All of those things are positive if, as long as we're not creating the conditions where, a person can be degraded, humiliated, abused, or forced to do things that others aren't forced to do in order to be a part of the group.
Mm-hmm. And that's where training comes into play, right?
Yeah.
Are we finding, what are some safe alternatives you're seeing student organizations doing to welcome new members specifically?
So, some organizations, choose to, for example, engage in, like high ropes courses or other kinds of like demanding, physical activities where the whole group is involved, or they engage in service opportunities. So really, as a group, giving back to the community. These ways, thinking about what is the outcome that an organization hopes that the hazing behaviors impart, and what are some replacements that are healthy, safe, and respectful that will help them achieve that outcome is what we want to think about. So it's a little bit of a reverse engineering. So reverse engineering, I want to create the conditions where where new members feel as though they have accomplished something that otherwise they would not have accomplished. How can we achieve that? I want for members to feel as though, they have been a part of a tradition that has, been a part of traditions, for 100 years, maybe. How can we achieve that in a way that involves everyone, that doesn't include degrading, humiliating, abusive, or embarrassing behaviors, and that does not create expectations that if you don't participate in it, you can't be involved?
It's my understanding, for example, that fraternities and sororities were originally created, to do service and provide for the public and the campus. And I think sometimes groups can kind of stray away from their main purpose. And so it sounds like coming back around full circle in a lot of ways, which is nice.
Yeah. Really asking student organizations, what is your mission? What are your goals? What are your values? How do we create an organizational culture that really lives into those missions, those goals, those values? And how does every part of the life cycle of a student being involved in this organization reinforce that? So definitely, this applies to any student organization, not just fraternities or sororities or athletic organizations.
Yep. And we covered this already, but I don't know if you could speak more to the importance of bystander training and addressing these student hierarchy traditions that we're speaking about.
Oh, absolutely. Well, so sometimes we see anti-hazing or hazing prevention efforts that look a little bit like see something, say something. So, this is what hazing is. This is the definition of hazing. If you see this definition of hazing, then you should report it to this location. The problem with that well-intended, but ultimately typically not as effective approach is that it ignores the skill building that has to happen in between there. So what we want to do is train students, faculty, and staff in noticing the low-level situations of hazing behavior, as well as those extreme levels, so that they can notice it at the lowest level possible where the least amount of harm has happened. Then not only do they have to notice it, which is the first step, they have to see it, then they have to decide, gosh, I'm seeing it and I know that it's a problem, that I have a responsibility to address. So noticing it, interpreting it as a problem, deciding that you have an individual responsibility to act. And this is the place where oftentimes our best intentions fall into the gaps, because we may notice it, we may see it as a problem, but not feel as though it's our problem to solve. So we have to reinforce that every person has a role to play in preventing hazing. And then if you see something, that you do have a responsibility to take some kind of action. Now, here's, the last two steps is really arming students, staff, and faculty with a range of actions that they can take, so that when they're in a situation, depending upon their location in that situation, are they a new member? Are they a student organization leader? Are they, a faculty advisor? You will have different positions, different authority, different responsibility, different means to act. We want to give a range of ways to act. And when all of those things happen, then an individual is so much more likely to actually take that action. And that's really that 5-step bystander intervention framework that is been demonstrated to be most effective, again, across all of these, health, safety, and well-being challenges that we see on campus, including hazing.
And now, as a parent myself, anytime we cover, these terrible hazing tragedies, I think of how scary it must be to be a parent with a college-age student who may be, considering joining a student organization. What roles can parents play to help prevent hazing on campuses and keep their students safe? Kind of help them not feel so helpless.
I love that you're asking this question, Amy, because too many parents believe, especially when we get to that 18, 19, 20-year-old range, that their students have stopped listening to them. And, it might look that way, but over, decades of research have demonstrated that regardless of how, a student's may be responding to parental advice or parental input, they're still listening to parents and really basing their actions and their decisions oftentimes on what they're hearing from parents. So parents have an important role to play in a couple of ways. I'd say the first way is to make sure that you're not unintentionally reinforcing that hazing is, a necessary or essential or, required part of the college experience. Sometimes as, older caring adults, as parents, we look back at our own experiences at college and recognize that maybe we participated in or experienced some hazing rituals. Not glorifying those hazing rituals, not, setting the expectation that, you're not going to have a full college experience unless you do these sorts of things, not creating pressure within an organization. All of those are things that parents can do. And then really setting the expectation that you want for your student to make decisions based on their values and based on the values of your family. And what that means is, certainly I hope that individuals are, choosing to act in ways that are respectful of all persons and that are respectful of themselves, that there are many ways to belong, that there are many different opportunities to create community, that no specific organization or college experience is defining for all persons, and that if anyone is asking you to do things that you feel uncomfortable with or that make you uneasy, whether or not that's engaging in doing that to someone else or having that done to you, that's the time to say no, and that if they do so, if your child does so, that you're going to be proud of them, you're going to respect them, and that their peers are going to respect them as well.